The lecture hall at the University of Colorado buzzed softly as students trickled in, flipping through worn notebooks and waking up their laptops. It was a typical Wednesday morning in Professor Eleanor Whitaker's notoriously grueling advanced differential equations class. Known for her precision and merciless standards, Professor Whitaker was a commanding presence, sharp features, gold-rimmed glasses, and a gaze that could make even the most confident students falter. In her classroom, excellence wasn't encouraged, it was expected, and excuses had no place. Today, she seemed even less tolerant than usual. Her footsteps echoed sharply as she strode to the front of the room. Without a word, she snapped a stick of chalk in half. The chatter died instantly. "Let's begin," she said coolly, brushing a lock of auburn hair behind her ear. "Last time, we discussed partial differential equations. Today, Fourier transforms." She turned and began writing on the blackboard. Her handwriting was sharp, deliberate, and full of intricate expressions. Students scrambled to copy it down, some already overwhelmed, others pretending they weren't. Whitaker thrived in this tension. She believed only the truly capable belonged here, and the rest were just taking up space. Toward the middle of the hall sat Nathan Brooks, thin, quiet, always in a simple sweatshirt and cargo pants. He didn't draw attention, rarely spoke, and never appeared nervous. While others struggled, Nathan observed with detached calm. To him, numbers weren't a challenge, they were familiar, intuitive. Equations unfolded naturally in his mind. As he glanced at the board, something caught his eye. A tiny flaw. It was subtle but real, a misstep in the third line. Nathan hesitated. He could let it go, but if Whitaker noticed later, she'd waste time correcting it. Before he acted, a student near the front raised a timid hand. Professor Whitaker, I think there's an error in the third line," the student offered hesitantly. Whitaker turned, arching a brow. "An error?" she repeated, her tone sharp with disbelief. She inspected the board, then gave a thin smile. "There is no error," she said curtly. The student shrank into his seat. Nathan sighed. He hated that, when professors dismissed students as if they were above reproach. Almost involuntarily, his hand went up. "Actually," he said, voice calm, "there is a mistake." The room stirred. Heads turned. Whitaker didn't flinch, but a flicker of irritation appeared in her eyes. "Is that so?" she said, folding her arms. "Please, do explain." Nathan stood, not to show off, but because he preferred to speak standing. "It's the third step," he said, motioning toward the board. "You misapplied the transform on the second term. The constant doesn't distribute that way. If you keep going, the solution diverges." Silence followed. Whitaker's jaw clenched. She looked at the board again, and there it was. The mistake. She gripped the chalk tighter. For a moment, Nathan thought she might acknowledge it quietly. Instead, she turned back, lips curling into a tight smile. "Well, Mr. Brooks," she said, "if you're so confident, why don't you come up here and show us how it's done?" A few students chuckled nervously. Nathan understood the challenge. This wasn't praise, it was a test. She wanted him to stumble. He wouldn't. He placed his notebook on the desk and walked to the front, taking the chalk from her hand. The pressure in the room thickened, eyes on him, whispers behind him, Whitaker watching like a hawk. But he stayed focused. He wiped the incorrect section and rewrote it. His script was rougher than hers, but the logic was sound, flawless. As he worked, he spoke clearly. The issue was in the transform's timing. You pulled out the constant prematurely, which distorted the boundary conditions. Solved this way, the function behaves as expected. The only sound was chalk scraping the board. He finished, set the chalk down, and turned. Whitaker stood still, arms folded tightly, lips pressed in a line. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not successfully. Nathan waited. Finally, she gave a short nod. "Fine," she said. "You corrected it. Well done." A few students exchanged glances. That was it? No acknowledgement? No thanks? Nathan didn't mind. He returned to his seat, aware of the shift in attention. Some classmates looked at him with newfound respect. Others frowned, maybe jealous. He hadn't done it to show off. He just couldn't ignore obvious mistakes. Whitaker turned back to the board, wiping away his work. "Let's proceed," she said coolly. "Since Mr. Brooks is so eager to participate, he surely won't mind another challenge." Nathan blinked. "Excuse me?" She didn't respond. Instead, she began writing again, this time a massive equation, sprawling across the board. It was filled with complex integrals, tricky limits, and a nasty differential term. She finished with a dramatic flourish, then turned to face him. "If you're as sharp as you claim," she said, "solve this." Tension filled the room. Nathan studied the equation. It was far beyond what they'd covered. She didn't expect a solution, just a stumble. She wanted to reassert her control, prove he was in over his head. He breathed in slowly. "All right." He rose again. Some students snickered, expecting him to flail. Whitaker watched smugly. "Take your time," she said. He didn't need to. Chalk in hand, he approached the board and started writing. No hesitation. No second-guessing. Each line flowed smoothly. He wasn't solving it step by step, his mind was already ahead, seeing the full path. The lecture hall grew still. Even Whitaker leaned forward slightly. Halfway through, Nathan paused and glanced back. "Would you prefer the answer in terms of hyperbolic functions instead of polynomials?" he asked. She didn't answer. He turned back and finished the problem, neatly, efficiently. He underlined the final result and set the chalk down. Silence. Then, from the back, someone whistled softly. Whitaker's expression was blank, but her eyes scanned the work obsessively. She searched for any flaw. There was none. The solution wasn't just right, it was elegant. Murmurs broke out. Students sat forward, realizing what had happened. Nathan didn't speak. He didn't smile. He just waited. Eventually, Whitaker spoke, voice clipped. "Lucky guess." Some laughed quietly, not at Nathan, but at her. "It wasn't a guess," he said evenly. "Sit down, Mr. Brooks." He returned to his seat. The atmosphere had shifted. Students looked at him differently now, with admiration, confusion, or even resentment. And Whitaker? She looked at him with something else entirely, but Nathan knew, this wasn't over. Professor Whitaker returned to the board, the chalk clenched tightly between her fingers. She resumed the lecture, but something in her cadence had shifted. Her voice, usually sharp and unwavering, now carried a trace of tension. Then, abruptly, she paused mid-sentence. Her gaze swept across the room, scanning rows of students until it landed squarely on Nathan. "If you're so confident, Mr. Brooks," she said, a brittle smile tugging at her lips, "how about we raise the stakes?" Scattered chuckles rippled through the lecture hall. A few students straightened, sensing what was coming. Nathan stayed still. "What do you mean?" Without answering, Professor Whitaker strode to her desk and retrieved a thick textbook. She flipped through it briskly, stopping deep into the graduate-level material. With a tap of her finger, she held the book aloft, revealing a dense, formidable problem. "This is from a course far beyond this level," she said. "Not something I'd expect any undergraduate to tackle." Murmurs stirred the room. "But since you seem to enjoy challenges," she added, eyes gleaming, "why don't you show us what you can do?" Nathan inhaled slowly. He recognized this for what it was, not a test of knowledge, but of submission. She wanted him to fail, publicly. She wanted to put him back in his place that he could say no. He had nothing to prove. But when he glanced around and saw some classmates watching eagerly, waiting for him to falter, that sealed it. He stood. Professor Whitaker's expression flickered, just briefly. She handed him the book, but he didn't even glance at the page. He'd already memorized it. With quiet focus, he took the chalk and approached the board. No theatrics. No hesitation. Just clarity. He began working, methodically, each step building off the last. The room quieted. Conversations died out. Even the skeptics leaned forward. Nathan's process wasn't showy, but it was precise, an elegant unraveling of complexity. He reached the final line, boxed his result, and stepped aside. The silence that followed was heavier than applause. Professor Whitaker stood frozen, her face unreadable, but her clenched jaw and white-knuckled grip on the desk betrayed her. From the back, someone muttered, "You've got to be kidding." Whitaker stepped forward. "You skipped a step," she said coldly. Nathan turned. "No, I didn't." "Yes, you did." He faced the board again, scanning the sequence. Then he pointed. "Here. The reduction of the infinite series. It's implicit, but the calculation's straightforward." He paused. "I did it mentally to save time." The silence was cutting. Whitaker didn't respond. Nathan met her gaze. "I can write it out, if you'd like." His tone was calm, even respectful. But that only made it worse. He wasn't challenging her. He was just correct. "That won't be necessary," she said through her teeth, returning the textbook to her desk with a thud. Nathan returned to his seat. He knew the balance in the room had shifted. The awe, the whispers, the exchanged glances, it was all different now, but Whitaker wasn't finished. "Professor," a voice called from the third row. Tyler, one of her usual defenders. "If he solved that, doesn't that mean he just nailed a grad-level problem? Shouldn't that matter?" Her lips tightened. "I never said it was unsolvable. Just uncommon for someone at his level." It was a dodge. Everyone knew it. Another student chimed in. "Shouldn't he be bumped to a higher-level course?" Whitaker hesitated. Then, recovering quickly, she smiled. "Actually," she said, voice softer now, "I think Mr. Brooks would benefit from a greater challenge." The shift caught everyone off guard. Was this concession? Praise? "That's why," she continued, reaching for a folder, "I'd like to invite him to represent the university at the Regional Mathematics Symposium." Gasps and murmurs rolled across the hall. "It's next month," she said. High pressure. Timed problems. Live audience. Faculty and scholars from across the region. She looked directly at Nathan. "I assume you're up for it?" Nathan saw it immediately. This wasn't an olive branch. It was a trap. A stage where failure would echo louder than in any classroom. She hadn't backed down. She just changed tactics. He didn't answer right away. He could feel every eye on him, but deep down, he already knew what he'd say. The next morning, Nathan slipped into his usual seat. The classroom felt different, charged, like something had shifted. Conversations hushed when Professor Whitaker entered, her expression unreadable. She set her notes on the podium, then paused. "Before we begin," she said, her voice steady, "I want to acknowledge something important." All eyes turned toward her. "Nathan Brooks took first place at yesterday's Regional Mathematics Symposium," she said. "He competed against top-tier students, including graduate candidates. His performance was exceptional." A beat of silence, then scattered applause. Tyler grinned at Nathan. A few heads turned toward him, not with surprise, but with recognition. Professor Whitaker offered nothing more. No elaborate praise. No apology. Just facts. And then she turned to the board, but for Nathan, that was enough. He hadn't done it for the spotlight. He hadn't needed her approval. What he needed was truth, plain, public, undeniable. He delivered it not with defiance, but with discipline. As the chalk began to move and the lecture resumed, Nathan leaned back in his seat. He didn't need to say a word. He'd already changed the conversation.